In this video, we'll be exploring the history of animation by looking at the core techniques that allow for animation to be achieved, the pioneers that built upon and progressed these techniques, and the different ways that animation can be used in the modern day. The three core techniques of animation are persistence of vision, frame rate, and stop frame. First up is persistence of vision. Persistence of vision is an optical illusion which relies on the fact that you get an after image which stays in your eye for about a 25th of a second. Persistence of vision is put into action by showing a subsequent image within the time frame of an after image. This causes them to essentially be blended, creating the illusion of continuity. A prime example of this is a classic bird in a cage, which you can see here. All it is a paper circle with a bird on one side and a cage on the other, being spun round by a piece of string really fast. Next up is frame rate. Frame rate is the number of separate frames that are introduced to the viewer in a particular time frame. This is normally in frames per second or FPS. The number of frames that you see will affect the detail of the footage, with less frames giving less detail, therefore meaning that it will start to look jerky. Look at the morphs that I made, you can tell that the 2 frames per second version is much smoother than that of the 1 frames per second version. If you check out these animated bouncing balls, the difference between 15 frames per second and 30 frames per second is significant. There is a noticeable increase in smoothness with each increase in frames. However, you get diminishing returns the higher that you go, with the increase in smoothness being less obvious. Despite this fact, the human eye can interpret up to 1000 frames per second. Finally, we have stop frame. Stop frame is also known as stop motion. It's a technique which can make objects look like they're moving on their own. It's achieved by taking a photograph of an object, then moving it slightly before taking another photograph. This process is then repeated many times, and then when the images are rapidly played in a sequence, it creates the illusion of movement, as seen on this basic stop frame animation that I created. Now that you know the basics of animation, let's move on to the pioneers, and start right at the beginning. 1832, Joseph Plateau. Joseph Plateau was a Belgian physicist who invented the phenaketoscope. The phenaketoscope was a spinning disc that had a series of frames on them. They worked by spinning them around very fast, using persistence of vision in order to create the illusion of a moving image. It achieved huge commercial success a few years after its invention. It was so popular and captivating back then because it was something new and never seen before, much like the SpaceX simultaneous booster landing was for me. It was unsurprisingly limited in its capabilities, as it only had a very small amount of frames that could fit onto a disc. This therefore meant that since creating the illusion of movement requires a lot of frames, only very small and simple movements could be shown on a phenaketoscope, with them holding very little to no narrative value. Edward Muybridge was the first person who discovered that taking pictures of an object in quick succession would demonstrate the motion, path and trajectory of the object's movement. This happened when he lined up a series of 24 cameras to take pictures of a horse, which when put together prove that you can capture motion. Edward showed these first motion pictures to the public in 1880, who were, much like with a phenaketoscope, astounded. This led to Thomas Edison meeting Edward Muybridge. Thomas Edison created the kinetoscope in 1889. By this point the concept of persistence of vision was well documented and applied thanks to Joseph Plateau and his invention of the phenaketoscope. Cameras were also much more advanced by this point, which allowed the kinetoscope to come together. The kinetoscope is a large wooden box, which allows a person to stand and look into it to view a motion picture at 16 frames per second. It created the illusion of movement by showing a series of sequential images on perforated film. It works very much like flipbook animations. The kinetoscope built upon the phenaketoscope by allowing people to view real moving images rather than artwork. It was a big step up at the time, and almost nothing like it had been seen before. Despite this fact, the kinetoscope did suffer some limitations. One limitation is the fact that only one person could view at a time. This is something that even the phenaketoscope did achieve 60ish years prior, allow for you to view it with your friends and react to it, which is a large part of the entertainment experience in modern day. Another is that the features shown in the kinetoscope were short. That, paired with the fact that it didn't have sound, meant that they couldn't properly show narrative, rather than just something that people would find intriguing. The Lumiere brothers had lots of experience in working with photographs and cameras, thanks to their education and father's occupation. The brothers pushed animation forwards by inventing the cinematograph, which is a motion picture camera. It uses Muybridge's discovery of taking many pictures very quickly, and it builds upon Edison's kinetoscope by displaying pictures at 48 frames per second, which is 3 times that of the kinetoscope. The most crucial development is that it also acts as a projector. This meant that, unlike the kinetoscope, multiple people could enjoy it at the same time as a social experience. The cinematograph was limited in that any film made in it was just one long shot. Take employees leaving the Lumiere factory, for example. As images were captured on one long strip of negative, no edits could be made, meaning that no cuts, different angles or shot types could be included. The cinematograph was also locked in place, meaning not even movement could have been achieved. The result was films without suspense and excitement. Around 1925, animation developed into something that is much more like what we're used to today. Willis O'Brien was one of the developers that contributed to this. O'Brien is known for his work on the 1925 The Lost World and 1933 King Kong. The Lost World showed O'Brien's ability to create complex scenes using stop-motion animation and provided the basis for his later work. One development that O'Brien made, with the help of Marcel Delgado, was the use of advanced armatures for the 1933 King Kong. O'Brien used clay models in his earlier films, but under the hot lighting, these were prone to melting and losing the form easily. Together, they created complex metal armatures with many different joints, which allowed for a very wide range of movement. They covered these armatures in rubber, which acted as skin and was far more durable. These armatures also contained a bladder which could be inflated and deflated, which created the illusion of breathing. This meant that if there was a shot where Kong was stood there still, there would still be signs of life and it wouldn't look like the scene had frozen altogether. Another development that O'Brien made was a technique used to merge real motion people and animation together. The technique used was called rear projection, and it worked by recording the live action footage beforehand and then creating a miniature set upon which the stop motion animation would take place. The set would have a glass screen in front of it on which the live action footage would be projected. O'Brien would then both move the armatures and advance the live action footage projection by a frame. He would then use a camera placed in front of this whole setup to take a picture, after which this whole process would be repeated. A limitation of this technique is the fact that the people in live action footage could not interact with the animation, as it was just a projection. They could only be in the same scene at the same time. It was also a very costly and time-consuming venture. There was very little room for mistakes and often no opportunities for retakes. The armature technique developed around 1933 has largely stood the test of time, with modern stop-motion animations such as Wallace and Gromit by Aardman Animation still using it. Aardman Animations still use the armatures with joints, however they've further developed them by using different materials such as silicone for the skin. They've also made use of 3D printing technologies, which has enabled them to create hundreds of interchangeable parts for the characters. King Kong's popularity has seen it have spin-offs and 2 modern day versions, 2005 King Kong and 2017 Kong Skull Island. Each one has seen major advancements in the techniques used and the way it's displayed since the prior movie. In 2005 King Kong, the live action characters are actively interacting and touching the CGI animated characters, such as Kong. This is something that could have never been achieved in the 1933 version. The 2017 version, Kong Skull Island, goes further with this. It relies on even more complex CGI animation to create lifelike looking creatures. To create realism, the animators built a hidden muscle structure that went under the skin on Kong in order to make him look like a living creature with insides. They also made sure that he sustained damage, such as when his fur was burnt from walking through flames. Whilst the animators pushed the boundaries in the modern version of King Kong, They didn't completely abandon its roots. They paid homage to the 1933 version by making Kong a new species, a gorilla-man hybrid, rather than just looking like a large gorilla like in the 2005 version. By doing this, it helps to keep the character feeling like the Kong that everyone knows, rather than some completely new character. Ray Harryhausen was a British visual effects artist who is known for pioneering the Dynamation technique. Ray Harryhausen started out being mentored by the previously discussed pioneer Willis O'Brien and worked with him on Mighty Joe Young in 1949, in which he ended up doing, quote, about 90% of the actual animation. You can see O'Brien's style echoed significantly in Harryhausen's work. Later he worked in his first colour film, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, in 1958, and then Jason and the Argonauts in 1963. Harryhausen created the Dynamation technique whilst working on a film called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Dynamation made use of the split screen technique, which had been around pretty much since the beginning of the film itself. Split screen is where part of the lens is covered up with black tape, so that light could only enter part of it. After the first take, this black tape is then reversed so that it covers the part of the lens that was initially uncovered, and then the film inside the camera is rewound. After this, the film is then re-exposed again on a second take, photographing the second subject. When the film is developed, both sets of photographs would therefore be on the same shot together. To explain Dynamation, we'll use the example of a monster attack on a city. Dynamation builds on the split screen technique by, firstly, filming the live action footage that can be used as background. This could be of people in a cityscape running away from the large monster, much like in The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms. This film is then developed and put into a projector at the back of the studio where the animation is taking place. This projector projects the frames onto the back of a projection screen, which is made out of a thin plastic that's been tightly stretched around the frame. Unlike with normal screens, it causes the image of the projection to appear on the front rather than the back. A motion picture camera loaded with new film is then locked into position in front of the screen. This is so that it can re-photograph the projected film clips as well as capture the new action that will be inserted into it. Next, a glass pane is placed between the camera and projection screen before being painted black over the parts of the shot where objects will be in the foreground or in front of the monster. A table is then placed in between the glass and projection screen, and this is where the miniature monsters will be placed upon. The projection is then advanced frame by frame and the monster slightly moved in order to simulate movement. After this, the camera is used to take a picture, and then this process is repeated over and over. Once the scene's been completed, the projector and camera are then both rewound, and the glass pane is swapped out for another glass pane, which is painted black in reverse to the original, just like how the lens is in the split screen process. This allows for the film to be exposed to the foreground part of the image, so that when the film's developed, it looks like the monster is moving out from behind it. This method made leaps for human and animated character animation by allowing for interaction. As the models were animated directly in front of the projection, Harryhausen was able to synchronise their movements, making it look like they were touching and affecting each other with what they did. This skeleton fight from Jason and the Argonauts is a great example. It shows how the two were almost seamlessly integrated together. Despite this, Dynamation was limited in that human characters could only actually pass behind the animated characters and not in front. As well as this, it was a large struggle at times to match the brightness of the animated characters in the background, which did no favours for a sense of immersion and would have lowered the quality overall. Harryhausen's movies were aimed at families, as people of all ages could enjoy them. For example, the film Jason and the Argonauts, whilst featuring violence, did not feature anything that could be considered disturbing. The film had light-hearted moments and ended on a generally happy note. As animation was such an incredibly expensive endeavour at this point in time, it's likely that the studios in charge wanted it to be accessible to as many people as possible to improve its commercial success. Jan Schwankmeyer is a self-labelled surrealist which is someone who supports the avant-garde movement, which is to be experimental, unorthodox and radical in relation to art and culture. He's known for animations such as Meat Love and Darkness Like Darkness, which both use stop motion techniques in order to create weird, nightmarish animations that show objects in twisted ways. Svankmeyer's work is based in using stop motion animation, just like O'Brien and Harryhausen. However, unlike those two, Svankmeyer didn't use rear projection, dynamation or metal armatures. Instead, he captured everything in one set, using real objects and people as well as clay. Because of this, he was able to seamlessly switch between using live action clips and stop motion, which wouldn't have been possible with the miniatures, and was also able to create a tactile experience, which is a core part of his work. The narratives that Svankmeyer created blurred the line between reality and the impossible, with most animations starting off in a seemingly normal situation that the audience could relate to, before subverting their expectations by manipulating the objects in perverse ways. Objects were made to act human-like, as seen in Meat Love, with them dancing and romancing. In reverse, the humans were made to act more like dolls or puppets, a bit soulless. Svankmeyer wanted his audience to feel uneasiness and disgust when watching his animations, as well as making them question the way that they view things. The way that he achieved this was through invoking people's senses by using sound and through the use of his style of animation. Sound plays a big part in Svankmeyer's work, with him often using overly exaggerated sound effects to tell a story, as almost all of his animations completely lacked dialogue. This use of sound, such as wet slaps of meat, or the scraping of wood, really draw your attention to the objects and help to give them texture and feeling, rather than them just being made of clay. Often the sounds used were disgusting, such as squelching noises when body parts are popping in or out. In Darkness Like Darkness, it makes something that is visually gross and also audibly disgusting too. Svankmeyer's use of stop motion animation also plays a role in how he makes the audience feel uneasy. By stop motion animating humans, for example in his film Food, it makes them look soulless and empty, and like they are dolls rather than living things. It allowed Svankmeyer to make them move weirdly, like sliding along the floor. When the audience watches this, it makes them feel weird as they're seeing something that they understand act in a way that breaks all conventions they've known for their whole life. Svankmeyer's work is not as mainstream as O'Brien's and Harryhausen's due to its content. O'Brien's and Harryhausen's animations were family friendly, meaning that all people of all ages could watch. None of the content would have been distressing, and the movies generally had a positive outcome for the characters. Svankmeyer's animations, on the other hand, contained a lot more mature themes and content, for example genitalia in Food or in Darkness Like Darkness. This meant that generally only older audiences viewed Svankmeyer's animations, and therefore they weren't as widespread as the other pioneers. The brothers Key are two identical twin brothers, Stephen and Timothy Key. They are stop-motion animators who were known for being experimental with their projects. They create animations which Stephen Key described as dark fairy tales with elements of grotesque and pathological. Their work is similar to Svankmeyer's in the way that they bring inanimate objects to life. For example, this screw in Street of Crocodiles, and use them in ways that isn't the norm, usually being somehow dark and twisted. Another similarity is the whole idea of the characters being human-doll hybrids. In Svankmeyer's, the humans look like dolls due to the way that they were animated, whilst the brothers Key brought actual dolls to life. The brothers Key played a large part in pioneering the forms of animation that were produced. Prior to the brothers Key, animation was basically only an entertainment medium, all the way from the phenaketoscope showing intriguing images, to Harryhausen's feature-length movies or Spank May's bizarre shorts. The Key brothers, whilst creating movies, also worked on music videos such as Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, idents such as the Calligraphy for BBC Two, and many advertisements such as the Nikon Fun Touch ad, which captures the Key brothers' idiosyncratic essence and places it into a product. The purpose of this form of animation is to market a product in order to boost awareness of it and sales, whilst they tried to make them entertaining at the same time. This was not the core aim of the animation of this form, unlike earlier animations whose one and only purpose were to entertain an audience. The reason for this is that, as time advanced, the amount of people with access to a television significantly increased, and therefore so did the potential of advertising. This meant that budgets allowed for these costly and time-consuming animations to be commissioned. Tim Burton is an American director, animator and writer. He is well known for his creation of movies such as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or The Nightmare Before Christmas. His name is pretty much synonymous with the Gothic and Macabre style that his work usually exudes. It's this Gothic style in Burton's work that draws many similarities with that of the brothers Key. The Key brothers came a bit before Burton, so it's likely that Burton was influenced by the work when developing his own sense of style. Burton initially worked for Disney as an animator and concept artist. He eventually made a deal with Disney so that they would fund 3 of his own projects. This led to the creation of his first stop-motion short film called Vincent, as well as the first iteration of Frankenweenie. However, the creation of Frankenweenie led to the termination of Burton's contract at Disney, as they deemed him to be using company resources on something that was just too dark for the company standards. Similarly, his movie, The Nightmare Before Christmas, was eventually changed to be released under the Touchstone banner, as the CEO of Disney found it to be too scary for children. It's clear that Burton's work was not deemed to be appropriate for Disney's audiences, as Disney's audience consists of children who could have found things such as a dog dying distressing. Tim Burton's work has a range of styles. Vincent 1982, a stop-motion animation, has a heavily macabre style. It is completely black and white, which gives off the sense of no happiness or positive energy in the story. This is backed up by the dreary organ music, which connotes death. The narrator speaks in a way that amplifies this effect by increasing the energy in his voice at key points in order to really drive the style home.
Being banished to the Tower of Doom, where he was sentenced to spend.
The Nightmare Before Christmas 1993 style is more welcoming than Vincent's. Whilst it has its darker tones, as it is set in Halloween Town after all, other colours than just black and white are used. The characters in it simply use normal voices rather than overly exaggerated ones like in Vincent, and there's upbeat musical numbers in it as well.
In the moonlit night, I excel without ever even trying. With the slightest little effort of my ghost-like charm.
Characters are also completely unlike humans, which makes this much more of a fantasy than his other work. Alice in Wonderland 2010 style is completely unlike that of Vincent's, but shares some aspects with The Nightmare Before Christmas. Alice has a more surrealist style rather than macabre. It features an extremely vibrant colour palette that many people might not strongly associate with Burton, despite it being similar to that of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The music used is much more twinkly, high-pitched and bright. And everything is also far less exaggerated, unlike the other 2 examples, which might be due to the fact that it is live action rather than stop motion, meaning that less effort is required to actually show understandable emotions from the characters. In Alice in Wonderland 1951, the story was unconventional. Alice didn't end up with a prince or get a particularly happy ending, which was a common trope for many similar stories of the time. Alice in Wonderland 2010 is similar in that she doesn't end up with a prince. However, the ending is more of a happy one rather than just neutral. This is a common theme throughout the whole movie. The 1951 version will attract an audience that likes things that are unique and different, whereas the 2010 version will attract an audience which is content to watch something that will leave them on a high note, even if it isn't unlike many of the movies. The Alice in Wonderland 1951 version is 2D animation, which has been achieved through people drawing each frame. It's much like stop motion, except instead of using real physical objects, you're using drawings of objects. Alice in Wonderland 2010 uses 3D CGI animation, and is a composition of animation and live action footage together, rather than a completely animated experience. It would have made use of a lot of mocap technology in order to create these human animation hybrids. These differences in animation will likely change the audience by making it aimed at an older audience. The 1951 version is quite simplistic in its art, and nowhere near realistic. This helps to separate the viewers from the world, meaning that they find it less scary, and therefore it's more suitable for younger viewers. The 2010 version would have been able to create a strong sense of immersion through its realism. This would bring the viewers closer to the action, and whilst nothing particularly distressing happens, for a younger audience, some of the content could be distressing to them, and therefore a generally older audience would watch this version. Aardman Animations, who we've discussed briefly in this video earlier on, have a very particular style that can be picked out in a lot of their work, particularly their stop motion work. It consists of a smooth, matte clear look for the characters, with the caricature-like semicircular mouths and rounded teeth, whilst employing lots of different techniques, ranging from techniques such as CGI, motion capture, papercraft and stop motion. Aardman is known the most for its claymation, which is stop motion using clay. Aardman achieved this look by using the interchangeable pieces and covering them with plasticine. This allows them to make the animation process more efficient and precise by using the new technologies, whilst keeping the clear look with the thumbprints on the objects. By doing this, it pays homage to earlier works and makes the work instantly recognisable compared to other studios which likely go for realism. The movement of models must be planned extremely carefully for stop motion animation, as the wanted result is the illusion of smooth movement, so that they look like they're living and breathing things. If the movement isn't planned carefully, then it could mean that the way that the character moves looks unnatural. That would mean that the viewer's sense of immersion would be destroyed, and because stop motion relies on taking many consecutive images, with each one acting as a single frame, if changes therefore need to be made, it means moving the characters back to their original positions right before the mistake, which is insanely difficult to achieve, if not impossible. Therefore, it would actually mean you have to restart the whole scene from the beginning, which would be an extremely expensive endeavour. By planning the movement carefully, this can just all be avoided. Stop motion animation allows them to include more detail when a character is talking. This is because the characters all have interchangeable heads, which allow for hundreds of different facial expressions to be placed into a character. As stop motion takes lots of images, it allows for many very minute changes in face shape and expression to be made, so that when all the frames are pieced together, the talking animation is very detailed. Wallace and Gromit: A Grand Day Out was the first Wallace and Gromit film to be produced. The techniques used were much more basic than today's techniques. For example, Wallace and Gromit were simply made out of clay or plasticine rather than silicone, and didn't have an internal armature, unlike today's models. This meant that their structure was much weaker than they are today, and became easily deformed after being under the hot lights for extended periods of time. The materials used today can withstand the heat, and the bulbs used release less heat energy anyway. This, paired with the armature usage, means that Wallace and Gromit's form is perfect, as seen in case of the Were-Rabbit. The frame rate that Aardman use in order to achieve smooth animation is 24 frames per second. This is consistent with the majority of the film and animation industry, and it strikes the perfect cost-effectiveness balance for what it is. Aardman Animations started off in 1972 when the name was registered by Peter Lord and David Sproxton. In 1976 they worked on the first professional project, creating Morph for a program named Take Heart. Later in 1985, Peter and David met Nick Park while working on his student film A Grand Day Out. Nick Park then joined Aardman in the same year. At this point in time their reputation was not the same as it is today, and the techniques that they used were largely rudimentary. By 1993 they'd created a Wallace and Gromit film called The Wrong Trousers. This achieved critical acclaim, and then in 1995 they released another called A Close Shave, which launched Aardman into the public eye as a household name. By 2000, Aardman was producing full-length theatrical films, with the first being Chicken Run. Over the years, Aardman continued producing award-winning stop-motion films until 2007, when they produced Flushed Away, their first CGI film. In 2010, the studio branched out into the gaming media form, with a Shaun the Sheep spin-off game being released, garnering 70 million plays within a year. By 2013, Aardman was very much a giant that it is today. They announced a filmmaking partnership with Studio Canal, who created the Shaun the Sheep movie, and then in 2018, Early Man. Aardman Animations have worked on advertising campaigns for the NHS with the Change for Life scheme. Using animation for these advertising campaigns has been very successful, as it makes the message immediately stand out. The characters, reminiscent of Morph, are all bright and vibrant colours. It immediately draws your attention to the visual messages shown, such as the high amounts of sugar in food and drinks, which subliminally plays on people's minds in the future. The way that the characters are animated also makes a healthy option look fun, which would be enough to convince the younger part of its audience. In short, it associates a bright and vibrant life with being healthy. In conclusion, the time between developments in animation has exponentially got shorter ever since the phenakidoscope was invented. It was largely picture and film based for the majority of animation's existence. However, in the second half of the 1900s, computer technology became advanced enough to start allowing CG animation to be produced. And this is when animation started to see many new offshoots, one of these being video games. Initially, games started off using sprite-based animation, which was small pieces of pixel art quickly switching between each other. For example, in Pac-Man. As time advanced, the computer software available significantly improved, meaning that game worlds could become three-dimensional. This brought with it three-dimensional animation, like in Super Mario 64. This could be achieved in software by adding a skeleton into a character model and then setting keyframes for the movements in it. These were all compiled together, allowing the character to do them in-game. This is generally how it was for a while, with improvements to the software becoming available. However, until motion capture became available, the general method didn't change. Motion capture allowed for humans to wear suits that could track the movements, and even facial expressions. This could then be quickly edited and exported into the game, so that the character models could then do the same actions as the humans did. Games such as Uncharted 4 use this, and it has made the gaming experience much richer by allowing characters to complete lifelike movements, which really helps for a sense of immersion. And that was the history of animation. Thanks for watching, have a good one.